I knew I was in trouble the second I heard that crunch. Not the soft crunch of leaves underfoot, not the comforting slap of a newspaper landing on the porch, but that unmistakable wallet-shrinking crunch that tells you something plastic and expensive just met something harder and meaner and absolutely unwilling to move. You know what I mean? I shot up from my couch coffee halfway to my mouth and stared out the window just in time to see this beige Cadillac SUV bouncing off the edge of my lawn like it was taking the shortcut to Narnia. It climbed down the grass, tore up two garden lights, and ripped straight through my irrigation line, all in about 5 seconds flat. And of course, behind the wheel, sunglasses perched up like a tiara. There she was, our local disaster in designer heels, Karen. Now, Karen was legendary around here for all the wrong reasons. You ever have one of those neighbors who thinks property lines are just vague suggestions and that speed bumps are government oppression? That's Karen. Her house was right across from mine, positioned just so she could see everything that happened. Her wind chimes didn't just jingle, they accused. If her dog peed on your flowers, she'd blame it on a sudden gust. If your recycling bin tipped over, she'd claim eco-terrorism and email the HOA before you could blink. And now she'd turned my front yard into her own personal off-road adventure. I opened my door just as she started unloading bags of organic kale and overpriced almond milk like nothing happened. Morning, Karen. I called trying to sound cheerful with just a little hint of threat. Road trouble. She didn't even turn. Your mailbox was too close to the curb, had to swerve. She pulled out a carton of eggs, slammed the trunk, and walked off like she'd just won the Nobel Prize in denial. I stared at the tire tracks in my formerly beautiful grass and tried not to let my blood pressure spike. Our HOA was strict once I got fined because my lawn was 2 shades too brown during a drought. But Karen, she could do anything and get away with it. Her sister was on the HOA board, her husband built half the homes in our subdivision, and she seemed to float above rules like some suburban royalty. Still, I called Henry our long-suffering HOA president. He answered with that sigh that lets you know his day just got worse. She says your mailbox was an obstruction he read from her latest complaint. If it's not 5 feet from the curb, it's 7. I cut him off. I measured it. Laser level. Certified. Another sigh. We'll issue her a warning. I'd heard that before. In HOA, language warning means a letter you use to line the cat box. But this time I smiled and thanked Henry. Didn't yell, didn't threaten, didn't even ask for reimbursement. Because this wasn't the first time Karen had taken the scenic route over my property. She'd done it at least twice before, once during the 4th of July barbecue, again at Halloween, when she didn't want to drive the long way around. And I was tired of being the speed bump on her shortcut. 3 days later, I installed what I like to call the Boulder Trap. 50-pound limestone boulders, half buried at the edge of my lawn, zigzagged just right so you couldn't drive between them without a miracle. To anyone else, it looked like a landscaping upgrade, but to someone trying to use my yard as a ramp, it was a trap straight out of Mario Kart. I even added solar lights, safety first, right? Less than a week later, I'm halfway through a bowl of cereal on Saturday morning, and there it is, that familiar engine growl, the roaring Karen Mobile, and then a deep metallic thunk. I look out and watch her bumper smack into my first boulder, the Cadillac bouncing back like it just lost a bar fight. She tries again. Full throttle hits the second boulder and leaves a chunk of her undercarriage swinging in the breeze. I step outside, cereal in hand, feeling like the villain in a Looney Tunes cartoon. Hey, Karen, I called. You mistook my yard for a monster truck rally. Her face turned bright red. Those rocks weren't here before, installed 3 days ago, I said. Cheerful. HOA approved. Want to see the paperwork? She spluttered. You put those there just to block me. Block you from trespassing. I smiled. Thanks for admitting it. That night she filed a grievance claim my rocks were a threat to community harmony. She showed up at the next emergency HOA meeting with blown-up photos of the boulders like she was exposing a supervillain. I came prepared too, with security cam footage of her SUV doing its best rodeo impression on my front yard. Half the board was tired of her. The other half was scared of her, but even they couldn't ignore video evidence. Henry, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes, said, "They're on his property. They're allowed. End of discussion." Only for Karen, it was just beginning. Because she hadn't just trashed my lawn, she'd also run over my freshly laid landscape, lighting wires, the ones I hadn't even hooked up yet. The day she hit those rocks, she crushed the wires and shorted out my garage transformer, frying the copper like overcooked spaghetti. So I called the sheriff's office calmly with my folder of footage. Deputy Randy showed up, looked at the boulders, sipped the coffee I handed him, and said, "She's been doing this a while, huh?" 3 years, I said. "She's basically the Godzilla of lawn abuse." He watched the footage, nodded, and said, "That's enough for criminal mischief. Maybe even reckless endangerment." I didn't want to push it. Not yet. I just filed the complaint and waited. 3 days later, Karen came storming across the street, waving the sheriff's letter like a surrender flag dipped in vinegar. "You called the police over a wire?" she shrieked. I grinned. "No, Karen, I called because you destroyed private property. The wire was just there." She lost it, claimed I was escalating, told me I was insane, then stormed off. But the real fun started when she decided to flip the script. Next thing I know, she's blasting out emails to the whole HOA, claiming I booby-trapped my own yard. She even attached dramatic photos of the boulders with arrows and claimed her dog almost died sniffing them. At the next meeting, neighbors finally spoke up. A retired couple described how she'd crushed their flowers. Another dad remembered her parking on his lawn during a party. Even Mrs. Delling, who never spoke, said Karen ran over her garden hose. By the time I stood up, the room was with me. All I did was protect my property legally and quietly. The rocks have never hurt anyone, but I have footage, witnesses, and a police report. The board voted the rocks stayed, and Karen was officially censured. For about a week, peace reigned. Then, late one night, I caught her on my camera, dumping bags of garden soil over my boulders, trying to hide them. She snapped some photos, maybe for another HOA complaint. I flicked on my floodlights, stepped onto the porch, and said, "Smile, Karen." She bolted. I filed a trespass report. She admitted everything, acting like it was a safety audit. But her smugness said she was planning something bigger. Then the lawsuit arrived. Certified envelope, real legal language accusing me of reckless endangerment and malicious landscaping. Glossy photos of the boulders now covered in dirt, thanks to her, and an affidavit that her niece almost tripped, even though her niece lived in Nevada. The kicker: she'd hired a real law firm. But see, I work in utility infrastructure. I know property law. I called Angela, my lawyer, who laughed after reading the suit. "She ran over your stuff, sued you for making your lawn too hard? Let's counter." Angela filed for dismissal, counterclaim for damages and harassment, and best of all, we ordered a full property survey. Turns out Karen's mailbox was 6 inches over her property line. The board fined her for encroachment and ordered her to fix it. In front of everyone, Henry announced the finding. Karen nearly combusted, her lawyer gave up, and she left in a huff. Then came the goat. Yeah, you heard me. One night I found a live goat tied to my boulders wearing a sign that read, "This is what you deserve." Animal control traced it back to a petting zoo Karen had never returned the animal to. She was fine-cited, and her lawyer dropped her suit the next day. But Karen wasn't done. She started filing city code complaints about my drainage, my tree trimming, even claiming I kept exotic animals in my garage. Every time I had documentation. Inspectors left empty-handed, sometimes with a donut. Finally, after half a dozen visits, I logged it all, filed a harassment report with the city, and asked for a hearing. At City Council, Karen showed up with accusations about me running an illegal landscaping business, and even tried to claim I was a TikTok influencer. I calmly laid out my evidence, videos, police reports, neighbor statements, my company's complaint about her false water meter report. The city panel ruled against her, warned her to stop, And within days, Karen put her house up for sale and was gone. After she left, things just lightened. Kids played in the street again. Henry even cracked a joke. The new neighbors asked me about all the flags and markings by the property line. Turns out, before any of this started, I'd been planning a big rainwater collection project needing a survey and permits. But here's the twist. When the crew finally dug, they found an old patio slab running under the fence proof. The property line was actually 6 feet farther onto what Karen always claimed was hers. I filed for a correction, planted lavender bushes right along the new line, called them Boundary Bloom. Wasn't revenge just restoring order and maybe a little poetic justice? As summer rolled in, we had a barbecue. Neighbors laughed, kids ran wild, and the boulders stood quietly by the driveway, monuments not to conflict, but to boundaries, patience, and the satisfaction of playing the long game. A kid once asked if my lavender bushes were magic. I told her, only if you plant them on the right side of the line. Some folks say you can't win with a Karen. Maybe not by fighting louder, but you can outlast them by being stubborn, by being smart, and by knowing where your lines are drawn. And that right there is how you finally take your yard back. So tell me, what would you have done in my shoes? Was I right to stand my ground, or did it just make things worse? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because honestly, there's a little Karen in every neighborhood, and I want to hear how you deal with yours.